Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the USA Today NFL Wire, episode 506. This is the first of many off-season shows. With me is Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, my co-host, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, we now get to transition. The season's done, so we're going to transition from just Cardinals to mostly Cardinals and then kind of the rest of the NFL, because Cardinals don't have anything going on right now, obviously. But yeah, are you ready for the playoffs this weekend? Even though the Cardinals, that I will of course be still writing content, and you can, as has been the last 2-3 seasons, the content you can expect to see from us is what former Cardinals are playing in this game. What are soon-to-be free agents from these teams that are of interest to watch for the Cardinals, and that side of thing. Totally.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun. I mean, it's obviously better when you're participating, but, my heart, I don't know how much it can take after going through a very long high school season that ended in a incredibly close playoff loss, and then youth football 3 weeks later where we won 2 nail-biters in championship games, and my heart needs a break. So I appreciate the Cardinals doing that for my health. I can't do 2 months straight of high leverage football every weekend. It doesn't bode well for the body. I see why these guys, and it's funny to look at a lot of them, but the pictures we get of the presidents, when they start and when they finish. If you do the same thing with NFL head coaches, it's actually hilarious. I mean, it's sad because it's their health, but it's actually hilarious to see how beaten down and broken they are, because it is
an extreme one that we've seen here locally. Torey Lovello for the Arizona Diamondbacks. By the end of every season, he looks so old and worn down.
And it's just, and people don't understand, and again, youth and high school is a different stratosphere than professional, so I can only imagine. But I was talking to my buddy that's a high school coach, and they had a deep run and they lost in the playoffs, and he literally just turned 30, and he's like, my doctor said I need to step back. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, just the stress of my blood pressure, my eating habits and all. And it's just people just have no idea. The way playoff football works is just so different, because it's win and go home, win and it's over. And all of a sudden it's over. And then you can get back to normal life. But during that time frame, you ramp up the stress to the nth degree. And so it's, it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to enjoy when you don't have anything but money involved, right? When you're like, oh, okay, let's see if I can make a couple shekels this weekend hanging out and watching football. And that's what Jess and I will be doing. And it'll be fun. And we'll be perusing the rosters of okay, who's available in free agency on this team. And it'll be interesting because it feels like there's a huge, obviously today's news, and you can go over that shortly. There's such a changing landscape of the NFL, and with the names that have left, obviously we'll see if one of them returns somewhere else, but it just feels like there's a really good chance of some change. And while the Cardinals are in a division with a lot of young coaches, including their own and Jonathan Gannon, that change kind of breathes new life and confidence into things. And we talked about it yesterday, like how weirdly confident, not cocky, but confident that we are of the direction of the team. Not saying that they're going to win a Super Bowl or anything of that nature, but that it looks like they're finally getting it right. And that, that's what makes it cool, because you don't have the pressure right now. And so now it's just the delusions of grandeur, right? So you don't have to worry about the reality sinking in quite yet.
Yeah, and in this show we'll talk about that. We've got 4 little segments that we're going to do. We're going to talk Cardinals-wise. We're going to give grades for the position groups. We're not going to talk individual play. Minor. We're going to talk awards. We'll delve into early predictions for the head coaching vacancies around the NFL, and then we've got playoff picks and props and predictions, because why not? Why not talk about the NFL and how you can make a few bucks this weekend? Let's start with grades. Obviously, we're a little bit removed from the last game. We talked about in our last show the optimism that there is, but let's take a critical eye at each position and the coaches, and kind of go over that. I don't know if we can really grade the entire year, because they were better than expected, then bad, then they look like competitive, but in the end, they still underperformed based on even the projected win totals. Thanks to Matt Prater. Sorry, people out there who had bet the over 4.5 wins, like I did.
Oh man, I didn't even think about that. That's a brutal beat. That's a terrible season beat, man.
That really is. It was 5.5 early, but it dipped early enough in the offseason that the Cardinals' projected win total was 4.5. Now, we will say, I thought Kyler was going to come back earlier and they would end up with 6 or 7 wins. And so I was super confident about the over 4.5, only to have Matt Prater do that. I mean, it was good for the bits. It was good for the script, but bad for those who thought that 5 wins was going to happen. And yeah, whatever. But let's break things down. Let's talk the quarterback position. If you had to grade the quarterback position from start to finish, what grade would you give that group?
I think you'd say a C. I mean, it was the definition of average. There was bottom lows. I mean, obviously the Clayton Tune start, and you don't want to throw Tune under the bus there. Not his fault.
With no help against that defense, that was a disaster.
Right. That had disaster written all over it. But so you had the Tune start, and then from there, you had the Commanders game, which was awful, but expectedly awful, I guess we could say, right? Then you had this first Seahawks game, which was unexpectedly awful. And then I think, you'd look at the Bengals game as not great. And then from there you had a lot of average games. You look at the win over the Steelers, very average. When you take into account the weather, the win over the Cowboys, a very average game from a quarterbacking perspective. And then you look at the high end play. You had the last 3 games, we talked about it last episode. You had games and losses against the 49ers and Giants where you're like, hey, this guy Josh Dobbs doesn't look too shabby, right? But so I think you had a lot of lows. I think you had some highs, and I think you had a lot of average in the middle. So I'd give it a C overall.
I like that grade. That's kind of where I put it, because I think the early season quarterback, if we're talking the halves, I think that if you took the pre-Kyler games, you would give overall a D, because there was some C play, there was definitely some F play, and then Kyler from start to finish in his return was about a B. I would give, I'd say, looking at the last 3 games, he pushed strong and had A performances over the last 3 games, but he was a pretty B playing, high C, low B play, and then we got basically barely passable quarterback play overall before that. So yeah, I like a C grade, but there was just crazy variance over the course of the season. Now, running back, I think I think the play of James Conner and the roles that the kind of how things turned out. I mean, early on, Keontae Ingram was bad, but I really think due to the strength of the season that James Conner had, the way that Amari DiMercado slid right into a very important role early on as an undrafted rookie, and then when he was healthy and called upon to be the main running back, he was solid. Michael Carter did well in once he started playing. I'd give the running back position a solid A this year. But that is heavily weighted because of the fantastic year that Connor had. Like, even without the 4 games, just the production that he had, the efficiency, the explosiveness, there was nothing aside from the injury. There was nothing not to like about James Conner's season.
Yeah, and you look at the 4 games where they were under 200 or 100 yards rushing, the Commanders game, the Bears game, and then the second Rams game, which was probably the lowest point of the Kyler portion of the season, and then again the Browns game. I don't even think we really count that. And then but you look at that, and I think you hit a great point, Jess. But this is what impressed me. You've got 4 games under 100 yards. You have 4 games over 200 yards rushing, which is kind of absurd when you think about it, right? And the fact that they went 2-2 in those games is even more absurd. But they went,
are the defense that, yeah.
Yeah. And so you look at it, but they had 4 games over 200 yards rushing. And so they were just a really, really good, borderline great run team. And we talked about it, whether it's the basic stats of just rushing yards, yards per attempt, yards per game, things like that, or the newfangled stuff like EPA per play and rushing efficiency and things like that. The difference between when Kyler was in and out, and yes, I understand that 4 of those games coincided with James Conner not playing at the same time that Kyler wasn't playing, but the efficiency of the 8 games with Kyler under center, I mean, it just can't be denied. And it was borderline great. I mean, I don't know any other way to explain those rushing numbers in those 8 games. You kind of said it too, like you come into this offseason and you can always add a running back, obviously from a need standpoint, you don't need one, but like you can always add a running back. But you look at it with James Conner, Michael Carter, and Amari DiMercado, you actually feel fairly.
You like that mix, not only for talent, but variety, because the type of players they are. And you can always, if you can get someone better than Amari DiMercado, by all means. But it's not a necessity. Absolutely, because you've got a guy who in that third running back role, he does those third. He is buying it right now, the definition of a 1990s third down running back. He comes in literally for passing downs only. He does pass protection. He catches the ball a little bit, and you can count on him to spell every once in a while or pick up a decent chunk of yards on a draw play or something like that. So it's perfect. It's perfect in the type of role that he is. And when he was given a starting role, he wasn't bad. He really wasn't bad. It was kind of nice.
He wasn't bad, and like you said, so I think A is completely reasonable. If you want to give it a B because of the failures of Keontae Ingram, the struggles to find the guys, with Damian Lewis, Tony Jones, that situation, I'm fine with that. I understand it, but I think when you come out of the season with what you have, I mean, this is what's crazy, man. Think about this. You have all of your main ball carriers this year. So anybody outside of Keontae Ingram that had over 20 carries averaged 5 yards per carry or more. I know DiMercado was technically 4.9, but like 5, that's an insane stat. Like just how good the running game is and how good it should continue to be. Like I liked it. Now, I was going to say on the flip side, we can go to this.
you're left with such a sour taste in your mouth over the last part of the season, because Hollywood, like we knew at the beginning of the year, Hollywood was cooking guys. He looked great, no production. He had a couple good games. Michael Wilson looked great. Rondale Moore, I know we need to stop having expectations for him. I sort of expect, if he's on the team next year, don't expect him to be he'll be a gadget player, running back, receiver. Maybe his future is a more running back role. I don't know. But I think if you look from start to finish, it's hard to give this receiver group even a C. Even a C is hard to give them. So like D+, maybe C- at best. But, they did have the injuries to Hollywood. They had the injuries to Michael Wilson. Wilson came on late, so he had a good start and a good finish. Rondale was wildly inconsistent. Hollywood had injury issues and quarterback issues, and so you were just left with the bright spot was kind of Greg Dortch, and that he continued to show progress as a receiver this year. That what he did under Cliff Kingsbury's offense translated into a more traditional offense, and so. But yeah, even still, I can't in my good like even a CC that's too high for what this receiver group did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think a D is fair. I mean, it seems harsh, but I think it's fair. This was a group that, like you said, there were struggles throughout, and the inability to stay on the field consistently, the inability to get anything consistently done. I mean, even Dortch, who had a nice, kind of flourish to end the season, there wasn't a lot of consistency even when he was, getting the ball and being asked to perform. And I think in the next group we'll talk about, I think when your two best pass catchers by the end of the season were both tight ends, like that's a exhibit of what more work needs to be done, and why, the announcement today that Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft was such a big one for the Cardinals, whether it means he's the draft pick or they're able to get somebody right after him. But it just, gives them more options.
The tight end position, I mean, look at that season Trey McBride had. The consistency with which Jeff Swaim played in his blocking role, the development of Elijah Higgins down the stretch. I mean, is it too optimistic for a team that was so overall bad to have two position groups that are getting A-level performance? But like the running backs and the tight ends deserve an A this year. I mean, we've never seen a Cardinals tight end season like that. And the fact that if we look at, it was before the final game of the season, but Trey McBride's production over all but the last game, the 9 of the last 10 games, paced him over a 17-game season for over 115 receptions and over 1,100 yards. If he were to extrapolate his per-game production in that stretch after he kind of took over for Zach Ertz, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable, but holy cow. Like, how do you not give that group? And Swaim was like the perfect veteran blocker. Higgins, who we have to remind people that there were eyes on Higgins, because when the Dolphins cut him, I believe it was 5 teams put waiver claims in on him.
Yeah.
And he was a late round pick, but has the athleticism, and we saw the play late in the year. He's got a little something. He is, like Seth said on the last show, he's exactly the sort of tight end Cardinals fans would go goo-goo over for the next year. What Dan Arnold did, Elijah Higgins basically did what Ricky Seals-Jones and Dan Arnold and Darren Fells did when they had those couple of nice late season games, and then you're like, yeah, big fantasy guy. But no, he's just a number 2 tight end, because you got Trey McBride, who is a literal stud.
Yeah, and that's what you look at the tight ends. That group is And you even look at what you got out of, obviously, that you mentioned Zach Ertz wasn't ideal, became a very, plodding kind of catch the ball, um, 6-7 yards away from the line of scrimmage type thing. But I thought Jeff Swaim looked really good before the injury, especially the blocker. And so to have a room of McBride, probably Swaim. Was it ACL with him, or what happened?
We don't know.
So yeah, but with McBride, potentially Swaim, I think you have to like that room. And then again, you have room to improve, but unless Swaim can't return, there's no like urgency, right?
Right.
And so I think you have your three. You're always going to have 9 in training camp because the special teams and all the other things that they get asked to do. But
yeah,
I mean, it feels rich to give a 4-win team another A. It really does.
Well, we're not going to be giving any more A's. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, it does. I mean, B+ is probably more fair, but I don't know. I just like what this group became.
Let's look at the offensive line. Really was kind of solid. I give it a low B performance what they did, because you got from the center to right tackle. Yilda Froholt was surprisingly solid. Will Hernandez was good. Paris Johnson, everyone's excited about him. You had a revolving door left guard, and then you had DJ Humphries, who wasn't great by any means. There were struggles, but he wasn't. I mean, he was still starting caliber. So, like, low B. I don't think they were bad enough to be a C. And when you look at the protection numbers for Murray, because they protected Murray well, and the run game, that is a product of the offensive line primarily. So you have, as we've seen, with the skill players that they have, their rushing attack was a product of good offensive line play. So I'm going to give them a solid low B. They were above average, but they weren't great.
Yeah, I think a B- is a really strong, accurate grade. We obviously have the questions on the left side if they choose to keep Paris on the right side, but I think you have, with outside of the snaps every once in a while, and they weren't even bad snaps. They're just high snaps that caused RPO reads to not be able to be executed. I feel like you have your answer at center. Froholt's only 27, I believe. And then obviously Will Hernandez is a player that he's still under contract, right? They signed him to a 2-year deal.
Yeah, he's under. Actually, when we look at the roster, Austin Ford did a really nice job, because the guys that you're like, oh, you got him for another year. He didn't lock him up long term, but you're like, oh, you got Froholt for another year. You've got Will Hernandez for another. You've got Beachum for another year. So you've already got your parachute for the offensive line. But yeah, it was just the left guard position. You were like, but the thing that's great is that was the only position where there was any question all year, and we've had the last several years where the offensive line was decimated, where you were having revolving doors at center, at either guard position, at right tackle. And DJ Humphries was the only guy other than last year when he was out with the back. The back. Every position seemed to be in question, and this year they had consistency. They had solid play. Defensive line, though, sorry, that defensive line. Yeah, like while you like the promise of Dante Stills as a rotational guy, you can't give that group anything better than maybe a D- just to be nice, right?
Right. I mean, we joked about it the other day, and it is. I mean, it's true. It wasn't like we were making it up, but like the guys that finished the season as starters weren't even on the roster when the season started. So I mean, you look at it, you've got Ledbetter, Collier, Watkins, and Stills on IR. You had Lucky Fotu, who came off IR for the final game. And that's not a shot at Lecky. That's just the reality of it. I mean, you look at these names, man, like, Ledbetter, 12 games, Collier, 1 game. Ben Stilley got into 5 games. Yeah. Carlos Watkins, 2 games. Dante
Phil
Stills, 15 games.
Hoskins.
Yeah.
Like Kevin Strong, like even when they signed Kevin Strong, we're like, who?
Yeah. Naquan Jones wasn't, 4 games. Like Roy Lopez, 14. Like there wasn't one guy that you're like, oh, this guy was the MVP of this group. And that's not a shot at these guys. It's just, the MVP was probably Stills, right? Which is absurd that you would say a 6th-round rookie with very little actual production was the MVP, but that's probably who it was.
And then you go to the edge positions. They looked productive early, so there was we were surprised at how productive. Then it was nothing, no production in the pass rush over the last. It's hard to.
All of a sudden, that manufacturing pressure went away real quick.
Oh my gosh! And so, that group of guys, I can't do you mind? You did a couple of things, like Victor Dimukeje. He did okay against the run, but the fact that Cam Thomas basically disappeared, that was disappointing. Zaven Collins, they like him, and I think there's still some growth for him. He turned into a solid 2-down edge player. Dennis Gardeck.
Somebody brought up a name about him. I don't know if you saw it, but they said he's basically Matt Shaughnessy, and you and I loved Matt Shaughnessy when he was here.
Shaughnessy, though, they're a different type of player because Shaughnessy was he was a legit D lineman who was athletic enough to play the edge,
right?
Because he was 280 is what he was. He was 6'4", 280. He was a big dude.
Yeah, but just in terms of how they became as edge defenders, right? They were never pass rush threats, but they were excellent run defenders and guys that you could have on the edge, and you'd have to pull them off the field in passing downs.
Yeah, but I will say this about Collins, and it was a question because I asked him after the game about his transition to edge. He was quick to point out that's not all he did. He played a lot of roles. He didn't line up at the edge every time, but when they had their all linebacker, he would line up inside. He played a lot in coverage, and so even though he was not a high, he didn't have the sack production that we'd hoped he might have. There were a lot of things that he's a defender. He's a tool. He's a good tool to have in your toolbox as a defensive coordinator. And when he's a first-round pick, it's good to have those, even if he doesn't have a future beyond next season. We'll see. I think there's still growth. But B.J. Ojulari showed a little bit of flashes, and he played more late in the year. But, yeah, that group, if you're being generous, it's a D-, and that's you only give them that grade because of how well they produced in the first month of the year.
Yeah, and when, again, a guy like Dennis Gardeck, who we both really like, is your best pass rusher, it's an issue. And
it is.
So, yeah, I think I would say an F is probably, reasonable.
At inside linebacker, you had solid play, solid general play from Kaiser White. And the way they played defense is that, honestly, they played one linebacker, one off-the-ball guy most of the time. They played a lot of 3 safety. They played a lot of 3 safety play where they would stick in there. It was basically a 5-1. So if you're looking at charting, rather than most 3-4 teams, when they go nickel, go 2-4, and they have 2 interior tackles and then 4 linebackers. You've got 2 edge and 2 off the ball. The Cardinals often opted for a 3-3 where you had your 3 interior defenders, you had 2 edge guys, and then you had Kaiser White in the middle. Kaiser White was having a B-type season. When he was lost, when he got hurt, then you went to Chris Barnes, then you went to Josh Woods. Owen Papo, after his terrible first start, went okay after that. If Kaiser had played the whole season, I think it'd be a solid B, but you're probably looking at about a C+ from that group.
Yeah, I think C is probably as high as you can go with that. It's just, so much of it was just again, like the D line, um, just personnel over time, and they had their issues to overcome in front of them as well, right? And then you're asking them to do things in coverage when you have no pass rush on top of it. It was a lot to ask that group in general, and so I think overall a C is fair, because I don't know if we actually saw how good they could or couldn't be.
And cornerback, that's a tough group because they didn't look good early. Kaitrell Clark looked, and then it was all over the place. I think you're going to give this group. I think that's going to give it like a solid C minus here because it wasn't great. But outside of Marco Wilson, you can't really say that the cornerback play was bad. Overall, this season it was passable. Marco Wilson's mistakes made things look terrible. Antonio Hamilton being your best corner, that's not a good cornerback room, but he's also not a bad player.
Right, and I think that's the best and most fair way to kind of evaluate it. And so, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't ideal. I think it's a C or C minus based on what we saw. The problem is you can't separate the Marco from everything else, and so it's like it's probably leaning more towards a C minus because of how poorly Marco played, and you hope he works out wherever he ends up
now. Safeties. So you had Buddha, you had Jalen. Jalen had a solid season. Buddha's a Pro Bowler, although statistically he was not nearly as impactful as
he was average statistically. We can say it's okay.
And then Kayvon Wallace early on, Andre Sachere. That's a B group. That's a B group because their safety play isn't bad, but it wasn't also like from Buddha and Jalen. You'd hope to get A performance, but honestly, they weren't A players this year. So
no, they weren't, and I think B's fair. I mean, like you said, with what you're paying them, you were hoping it'd be a performance, but I think relative to everything else, it was a B.
Special teams, and I'm going to group them all together. So the season that Blake Gillikin had was really good. Matt Prater was really good until the last two kicks. The return game was so I'm going to give the special teams overall a solid B.
Yeah, I would have said A, but the special teams, the return game, nothing overly impactful.
You got some good returns from Dortch, but there was nothing.
Right.
And it's really hard to have an impactful return game anymore. But the fact that they had to change punters,
oh yeah, I forgot about the Nolan Cooney disaster. Yeah, that I think B's fair then because you're still talking about 4 games where a guy was awful.
Yeah. So, and then coaching. What sort of job would you give this coaching staff in year one? Obviously, you can't give these coaches an A for a 4-win team. Nope. You can do that. You can do that for D'Amico Ryans. You can't do that.
No, somebody asked me this the other day, and I said, here's how I would do it. Just again, based on from a slight outside perspective that we have, right? I would say preparation, game planning, things of that nature, practices, all of that, I would say was an A. Outcomes on game days was to that point a D. I think you could maybe move it to like a C minus now. And that would make it a C plus B minus. And as a homer, you kind of lean towards like a B minus, like like the 79.8. And you're like, I'll give you a B minus type stuff.
I kind of like that. If you look at the tools they were given, what they got out of them, and so
that's such a huge part of it.
There was high effort here's the thing. Honestly, they didn't overperform. They didn't outperform expectations. there were times in the season where they looked like they were outperforming expectations. But when you look at the totality of the season, they didn't outperform expectations, and they also didn't underperform because they weren't some people. I guess from some national perspective that thought this Cardinals team would be awful. We knew early on that this was not a bad team, just a plain bad team. This was a good bad team that became a bad team and then became a competitive team. And so, yeah, I think C plus B minus is very fair, especially because we did see Gannon. Like, there were things we questioned. There were some of his in-game decisions I felt I didn't like them. I did not like often. I don't like the frequency with which he went for 2 points in certain situations. I didn't like some of the fourth down calls, and that maybe that's less on Gannon than it is on Petzing or the players. But so, just like with Cliff Kingsbury his first year, there were things to grow, and we saw him grow after that. And so I think he wasn't. The most important thing is that this team he knows what he's doing, and Cliff Kingsbury, he had been a head coach before, so he knew it. This is a first-time head coach. He knew what he was doing. There were times with Steve Wilkes it felt like he talked like they had a good plan. We knew it wasn't. Should they have given Wilkes another year? I to this day I think you have. Like you should, given the situation he was given. But Gannon comes in and we raved about the intentional nature of everything he does. There is not a detail that he hasn't kind of gone over. And for me, when you're building something from zero, which is basically what this organization was at, the fact that he can do that he's thought that through, I'm really impressed. I really believe that he is a very good head coach. And I will say this, which I've said many times on this show over the years, I don't think there are many coach difference makers. And I'm not ready to say that Gannon is a difference maker as a coach. However, I do believe that he is a coach that can have lots of success for years to come because he believes in putting good guys around him, and he preaches all the details. And so it's very much like a good college program. The best college head coaches, especially because they're dealing with molding young men. Nick Saban, he's a control freak. You don't know that. Like, Arizona State fans were annoyed at some of the things that Todd Graham did. Nick Saban is no different. It's about kind of having the same message across the board and every part of that. And I really like that. And some coaches can get away with that if you've got the right type of roster. Gannon didn't know what type of roster he was having. And so you build that, and then you can adjust from there. So I love this coaching staff. And it's high C, low B, but you couldn't expect more. You couldn't expect more out of this team with this talent. D'Amico Ryans gets an A. I'd give him an A, but he also had C.J. Stroud for an entire year, who was a rookie quarterback, who's an absolute stud, outperformed and he looks like a legit star. And after this year, I will be happy to root for the Texans and C.J. Stroud, as long as the Cardinals aren't tied up in their draft picks.
No, and it'll be fun to see how it plays out. I think you hit something, on the head too. It's not necessarily that we're bought in as like Gannon, the in-game strategist, genius type stuff, but he seems to have a guy, or he seems to be a guy that other guys buy and other guys buy into. And so much of that is so important overall to just being, like a good coach and like you said, a guy that people buy into things. And he is great at and so that'll be what the challenge is. We'll see. Obviously, let's hope it's a problem, but do they have the pipeline in place to have, Robert Saleh and then D'Amico Ryans both get head coaching jobs in 2 years, and Mike McDonald and Bobby Slowick and those guys, like leave the facility and you can continue to be a strong team. That's what it's really about, right?
Yeah.
And I think you hit that perfectly. Like he seems like a guy that loves his people and knows what he knows and isn't afraid to get people in to take over for what he doesn't know.
Yeah. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals talk. Well, we spent a long time on that. Let's kind of go through quickly. What awards and recognitions do we want to give to the players on this team? That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals talk on the web, giving out team awards. They're not actual awards, but this is what, if we were going to publish these, and I'm sure we will both do articles on these after we put this together for the podcast, because we get them for the views. We write them for the views and for the analysis, and not just the views. We do that. That's not the truth. We don't write things only just for the views. But let's start with the awards, and I think obvious one. Who's the team MVP? I think this one's very, very obvious.
James Conner.
James Conner. Like, there is no other question. He was far and away the best player on this team, the brightest spot on this team. James Conner, MVP. But since he's on the offensive side of the ball, who would be your defensive player of the year for the Cardinals?
Oh, jeez. I mean, probably Jalen.
I guess say Jalen's. Yeah, I'm going to say this. Even with an injury-shortened season, I like Kaiser White because of how he was the tone setter. Remember at the beginning of the year, and it was a little bit less so, but he set the tone. I do not remember at any point with this team a defense that was that physical and flew to the ball the way they did earlier in the season. So Jalen, I can buy it. I'm going to go ahead and give it to Kaiser White.
And I think that's fair too. I mean, it's unfortunately it's difficult, not for the reason we want it to be.
Right. Best rookie. I think this one's easy.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably make a case for Garrett Williams and Dante Stills just based on what they were asked to do and how they were asked to do it. But I mean, it's obviously Paris.
It's definitely Paris. Like there were good contributions from rookies, and even like down to Starling Thomas, to Amari DiMercato, to Dante Stills, Garrett Williams, even Keitrell Clark early in the season. Michael Wilson had moments, but you're looking at you had a top 10 pick who played every single snap, and while he wasn't perfect, there was not a single game where he looked out of his. He was not punching him. he was that guy, and I'm going to write about it because the comments that his teammates like Will Hernandez gushed about Paris. And I'm pretty sure I can find quotes about DJ. The fact that there are players within the locker room that call him All-Pro P just tells you the belief in the type of player that they have in Paris Johnson. Every single snap this year, he had to block he was the primary assignment on some of the absolute best pass rushers in the NFL this season, and he held his own. He wasn't perfect, no, but in the run game, guess what? Once he got his hands on you, guess what? Nothing was happening.
Yeah, it was over.
It was over. He was so good. He's so good. Now, if we're going to do a subcategory, who was your most surprising rookie?
I think Dante has to be. I mean, to get anything from a 6-rounder is incredible in and of itself. But to have a guy probably be your defensive line MVP, to be the most impactful defensive lineman for almost a full season before he left with an injury, it was awesome to see. And you and I talked about him pre-draft and how much, you know, he had that little bit of Darnell Dockett in him, right? But
Yeah.
it wasn't quite Darnell, it wasn't quite the physical guy Darnell, but like
He doesn't have the darkness that Darnell had in his heart. I think that's kind of part of it. Darnell Dockett had a darkness in his heart.
Right.
And that comes from a dark past and upbringing, but that was something that propelled him in the NFL. I don't know if Dante Stills has that, but
no, but he's looked fantastic, and you have to be excited about what he brings.
I'm going to give it a two-part top most surprising rookies, and I'm going to give it to one. I'm going to give it to Martin DeMarcado and to Starling Thomas. The contribution that Thomas played late in the season as a guy they claimed off of waivers, off of the Lions, was nothing short of surprising. And then the fact that DeMarcado, had any Eric Sorensen, a guy who works over at AZ Sports 360, producer for Free Radio Show, is a good friend of mine. I talk to him in the press box when he's there. He knows about it because he's a bit TCU. He went to TCU, so he follows his Horned Frogs. And Mario DeMarcado wasn't spectacular at anything in college, but the fact that he came in and was not deficient in anything, and to build in that role and to have the explosive runs that he had, the game that he had when he started against Baltimore, I count, for me, that is the biggest surprise for me. If we're doing the best non-rookie newcomer, who is that for you?
Non-rookie. It would have been Kaiser.
Yeah, I'd go with that. But
you know who needs to be mentioned, though?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't want to steal yours in case this is who you mentioned.
Well, this is going to the biggest surprise. Hjalte Froholdt.
Okay.
Hjalte Froholdt, my biggest surprise of the year, because we talked all off season. You're not really going to go into a season with Hjalte Froholdt as your starting center. You're not there's going to be a center move. There never was. And Hjalte was good. And that tells me that is something about that front office that I am super impressed with, because they found a guy who was a nobody and signed him for 2 years, and he played dang near every snap and it wasn't only not bad, he was plus for many games.
Yeah, and you look at it, I mean, he had a real bad stretch in the transition from Dobbs to Kyler. And, I don't think we talk about how much that is on the transition, not on either of the quarterbacks, just on the transition. And, at that time, you and I talked a lot. It's like, man, he's struggling really bad. But after those 3 games, the last 5 games, he looked phenomenal. He looks like the guy that can be the guy for the next 2 or 3 years, which is huge, as we've talked about.
Yeah, just a dude that was a backup. He was a backup on the Browns. So, yeah, for me, he's my biggest surprise of this year, of the non-surprise. Now, what are your biggest disappointments? Obviously, there were lots of things to be disappointed in, and unfortunately, so I could, if we had a comeback, I think Kyler, we can give Kyler the comeback player, if we're going to give a comeback player, because he came back and did that. But where were the biggest disappointments for you from the players this season?
I think the biggest disappointments were just the injuries. I didn't have high expectations going in this year. I didn't really expect much of anything from this team this year. Let's be honest. We didn't know when Kyler was going to come back. We didn't know what to expect with Jonathan Gannon. Then he has those cheesy press conferences and sound bites and things like that. Maybe that was the most disappointing thing, right? Is why would the social media team do that to the new head coach, man? But you just look at it. I just think that the injuries were so disappointing, because there were just so many guys that we weren't even able to evaluate. And I mentioned it the other day, whether it's Marquise Hollywood Brown, Michael Wilson, Like obviously every defensive player that they signed, it's just, you're just like, I don't even know what they have for certain things, and that makes it frustrating because you can't like, you and I, obviously they see the practices, they know they have feelings for what they have, but you can't really accurately evaluate those guys without seeing them play, and just not getting to see that. That was super disappointing.
So for me, if you're talking about actual performance, obviously I think for me that the biggest disappointment was Marco Wilson this year. Just the absolute drop off it. But most of the other biggest disappointments were for other reasons. LJ Collier, I was disappointed because that was just because I wanted to see him play in that interior role. And so I was disappointed he got hurt. So he wasn't a disappointment in terms of performance. He just got hurt. I think you can look at Hollywood Brown's season as a disappointment, but not because he played poorly. He got hurt, and his quarterbacks played poorly. But like in terms of the player who was disappointingly not good, for me that is Marco Wilson. And I think the biggest surprise, I guess you have to. I guess if we're going to do this one, it was breakout player. Who was the Cardinals' breakout player? This one's easy.
Yeah, Trey McBride.
Trey McBride, breakout player. And
you could potentially say Paris Johnson, but I don't think you can call a rookie a breakout guy either, right?
No. Now, say you could, if the Cardinals move him to left tackle and he's great next year, okay, breakout player next year in year 2, but we'll see what happens there. Coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk two things. We'll just combine it into one section. We're going to talk briefly about the head coaches search. It's not a lot. And then we're going to talk about our playoff picks, predictions, and maybe a few props. We're a little bit later in the week, but it's Thursday, so there's not all the props yet. So that's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea-Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk. We're going to talk head coaching candidates, a head coaching vacancy. We just want to throw some predictions out there. Just some predictions out there to what we think is going to happen. We don't have any information yet, but there are 7 vacancies. You've got the Commanders, Falcons, Patriots, Chargers, Raiders, Panthers, and Seahawks. Who do you think lands where? Who do you think lands where? And because there's a whole.
You want to just start with the Commanders?
Do you think it'll be Bieniemy?
I think it's going to be. I think they're going to go all in on Belichick, man.
Oh yeah, but I know the Atlanta's trying to, but
Atlanta as well. I think those are the two. Here's the thing with Belichick, and far be it from Arizona Cardinals fans to criticize, but the dude really hasn't won, right, without Tom Brady. So I mean, and his age, are you really wanting to invest that? That's why. But if they are, those two places make sense. Commanders, Josh Harris, looking to make a big move. Obviously, the NFC East is the NFC East, and then Arthur Blank is, he wants to win a Super Bowl before he dies. He's actually said that. That's a big thing to him, and so he'll go all in on getting a guy like.
And the reason why I think Atlanta is a nice fit there because the supporting cast is there. They need a quarterback, and so I think they go out and get a vet.
Chargers.
And so
we'll see. Who are you thinking for the Chargers?
I think doesn't it feel like, Belichick's a good fit there, but it feels like Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I was going to say Harbaugh, man.
It feels like Harbaugh's going to go there. Though.
Before the sanctions come down, before,
He's going to Pete Carroll. He's going to totally do a Pete Carroll.
100%. Let's stay in the East, or the AFC West. Raiders. They're going to retain Antonio, aren't they? It kind of feels like they have to. I mean, unless they can get Harbaugh, like where are you going? That's or Belichick, obviously, but like where are you going? That's an upgrade.
Right. And Pierce did like that.
Oh yeah, he did a phenomenal. Like ASU feelings aside from you guys, like that dude freaking coached his butt off.
Well, right, and he does, like, he's fiery. I don't know how long that's sustainable, but he's like, if you like what Robert Saleh is as a coach, if you like what D'Amico Ryans is as a head coach, Antonio Pierce is that same type of player. If you liked Mike Singletary's brand of coaching, now how he coached, like that brand of stuff, Antonio Pierce is totally that guy. Now Seattle, Dan Quinn makes too much sense, doesn't it? It's new yet familiar.
Yeah, I would assume it's going to be Quinn. I mean, especially if Carroll stays on in the front office, like that's the rumor, right?
Yeah, that would make it. It would fit. Here's a fun one. Wouldn't it be fun if Steve Wilkes gets the job in Carolina?
A year late.
Because
you have to think that they're going to go hard for offensive guy, though, right?
You'd think so. You'd think so. You would need that.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, this year isn't it, but do you think that they might be willing just to move off of Bryce Young? I mean, they can't this year, obviously, because they don't have a first-round pick.
Right.
But like, do you think that's like? Do you think it's tied to Young, or do you think that'll be what's interesting to see?
With the way rookie contracts are, if he's not impressive in year two, but Mike, you gave him nothing. You gave Bryce Young nothing to work with this year.
Oh, I agree 100%.
Like, that was a terrible situation, and seeing what he did in college, seeing the few little parts of games that I saw Bryce Young, I see a lot of Kyler Murray in him, and so it makes me feel that it's more the situation than the player, and so get a guy that's going to believe in him, give him weapons, and see him grow in year two. And
so, let's stay in the NFC South. Who do you think the Falcons get? Belichick?
I think that's I think so. If anything else, I think that's a good fit.
I'm going to go with another name that's been bantied about, and I'm going to go Eric Bieniemy.
Ooh.
I think Bieniemy gets his first shot in Atlanta. We'll see how it works out and everything, but you said Steve Wilkes for Carolina. I think they're going to
Ben Johnson, right?
I was going to say, I think they're going to open up the freaking vault for Ben Johnson. They're going to just back up the Brinks truck and whatever this guy wants. So that leaves two. Let's go Titans.
Titans.
Wasn't that baffling too? Isn't that one of those ones?
Well, here's the thing. Vrabel didn't see eye to eye with Ron Carthon.
No, and that's always what's interesting.
And so
things happen, right?
Yeah, and I get it. I get that. And so Vrabel's going to land somewhere. Scratch that, because it sounds like I think it'll be Vrabel or Gerard Mayo in New England, but Vrabel in Seattle makes a lot of sense too. But the Dan Quinn connection just is too much.
I think the Titans go with the Slowick guy out of Houston.
That's not a bad way to go.
And then I think you were going to say it. I'm going to probably agree with you, but Patriots, it's either going to be Vrabel or Jared Mayo, right?
Yeah, that kind of, well, and the things it sounds like Gerard Mayo has been kind of being
groomed
for it. Although having Vrabel open up like he's available, that might change minds, because Vrabel's a fantastic coach. He really is. You look at what he's done in Tennessee performance, but you look the way he coaches, I don't know if there's anyone that dislikes him or doesn't believe in him as a coach, right?
Right.
So yeah. let's go. Those are just early predictions, and so you can mock us later when we're
when we're very wrong.
When we're very wrong. But let's look at this playoff weekend. Let's look at predictions, and let's look at potential props. We've got 2 Saturday games, 3 Sunday games, and a Monday game. It starts off with the Saturday afternoon game on NBC. Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans. I don't know if this is simply me trying to keep the Texans from winning, but honestly, Joe Flacco, as long as he's not hurt, like a healthy Joe Flacco with that defense, it's really hard not to think that that's going to be anything other than Cleveland, right? CJ Stroud has been so good, but Cleveland's defense is so good, and Joe Flacco has been the perfect quarterback for them. Flacco is not new to the postseason. As we know, a decade ago, he had one of the best quarterback playoff runs we've ever seen for the Ravens on the way to their championship. So I like the Browns in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking the Browns in this one. And one quick prop bet to think about in this one, I've got look for Amari Cooper's been on a complete and utter tear ever since Flacco took over. And then as great as the Browns defense is, they're not going to, I could be wrong. I don't think they're going to pitch a shutout. So look at both Amari Cooper and Nico Collins ladder parlay on those two guys. So, 75 is their base, 74.5 for both of them, 80, 90, 100. I don't think it's a bad idea. I think they're both going to put up big numbers in this one, and it's going to be a shootout and fun to watch.
Yeah, give me Joe Flacco over 1.5 touchdown passes for plus 100. I think that's easy money. He's had 2 or more touchdown passes in all his starts. So
well, and you know what's crazy about his lines, or what have been crazy about his lines, is that they haven't gone crazy yet. Like 2 touchdowns at plus 100 is nutty, and I don't even mind CJ Stroud over 1.5 touchdowns at plus 130, unless you just don't think the Browns score 2 touchdowns. Which the Texans. If that's your thought, that's fine. But I think he's going to still throw the ball quite a bit. I could see a garbage in there, if they're getting beat. But I like that one. The Saturday that everybody's complaining about already. 2 things. It's only on Peacock, Peacock app. They're not doing any trials either, so just be aware of that.
Everyone, you had your chance. You know what I did? I signed up for Peacock for $20 for the year on the week after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so just so everybody's aware, man. And then the other thing is, I don't know how about you. I'm probably staying away from every single prop bet in this game.
Oh, definitely no.
With the weather,
and I'm not I don't like the props in this game. I believe the Chiefs will win. Would I bet the money line at minus 225? But I am 100% not confident in any spread pick.
No, the only thing I might be confident in is under 43.5.
Yeah.
With the weather.
Yeah.
But everything else, man, stay away from it. It's not worth the headache.
We have the Sunday morning game. Morning for us. Sunday 1 p.m. Eastern game. Steelers, Bills, no TJ Watt. Bills are on a tear. However, I like the Bills to win, but I don't like them to cover. They don't win by double digits, pretty much. They did against the Cowboys, but they play close games because Josh Allen, you're going to get 2 or 3 what in the world plays, and then he becomes stud Josh Allen. And no TJ Watt's not there, so that's going to be a struggle. But Mason Rudolph at quarterback has been, his first 2 starts were 30-point games for the Steelers for an offense that was absolutely just atrociously bad. I think this will be, I don't think it'll be, I think it'll be over 35.5. That's a really low line. But I think it'll be a 1-score game. But the Bills come out on top. I'm thinking 24-17 type game.
The one prop that has really kind of caught my eye in this one is Najee Harris's rushing yards over 57.5. Najee's usage is, absurd. We all know that, but the Bills have a great pass defense. I mean, phenomenal pass defense. And then Najee, the last 3 games against Baltimore, albeit not the normal Baltimore team, Seattle and Cincinnati, he had 78, 122, 112. His prop right now is 57.5. It's going to be nasty in Buffalo, so I don't know what the passing game is going to look like. Najee over 57.5 is the one prop I like just because of the weather.
And I like 2. I'm going to ladder this. James Cook over 65.5 and then take it up to 75 plus. So over 65.5 is minus 115. Bump it up to 75 plus, you get plus 135. We know about the Steelers' run defense. The Cardinals were able to run all over them. That doesn't mean they're not going to get roasted, but I think James Cook, especially, the offense for the Bills has been let James cook. So
right.
And so and so like if you want to go crazy for 100 plus, like adding another unit or a half unit to ladder it to 100 plus, get you plus 380. And so if you're confident, I feel comfortable with the 75 plus, and if you're willing to add another half unit after that, add 100 plus, you've got a potentially really nice payout at plus 380.
And I'm taking the Bills too. I'm with Jess. That 9.5 seems absurd. The 35.5, I don't know what to think because of the weather situation. Bills, stay away from the over under. Take the Bills. Don't take the points. So stay away from the points. If you're going to parlay something in the terms of a money line parlay of Browns, Chiefs, and Bills, even though that minus 485 is not great, that'll get you in plus money and get you a little profit. On the flip side, Packers, Cowboys, over 50.5 on lock. I just don't see either team stopping the other. I've got another.
I like, and like, say what you will about the Cowboys in the first round, Cowboys, Packers, this. I think the Cowboys run away with this, honestly.
I think they should. I agree with you 100%. The other ones I like in this one, I like, where's he at? Jake Ferguson over 43.5 yards, and then I like Jaden Reed over 49.5 yards for the Packers. I think both those. CeeDee Lamb I trust, but when you're at 100 already, I'm always like, I don't know if I want to. Like 98.5 is your base. Like that's just not something I'm looking for on the weekend, right?
So here's one. Here's one I like. Total combined interceptions over. This is Dak plus Jordan Love over 1.5 at plus 120. I think Jordan Love throws a couple interceptions, and so that in itself to get plus money on over 1.5 picks combined between the two, because you're only getting, like, if you like just the over half interception for Jordan Love, that's minus 140. But if you think he's going to throw 2, which I think he'll probably turn the ball over twice, is to get that plus 120 is a good one for me.
And then the final game is LA at Detroit. Poor Detroit. I mean, I hope they win, but man, they had to get LA in this one.
I picked the Rams straight up on this one. I mean, both are great offenses. Both are great offenses. Both are not good defenses, but the Lions' run defense is great. And so this is a really good matchup because Kyren Williams has been so good. 5 100-plus games in the last 7. The Cardinals saw it firsthand in 2 games. Kyren Williams has been amazing. But do you trust Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, or do you trust Dan Campbell with Jared Goff? And they're not going to get it. I just don't think the Lions are going to. I had for my picks for Sportsbook Wire, it's not an underdogs picks, it's just playoff picks this week because you can't pick 3 unless you're crazy. I don't honestly, I could pick 2 underdogs as I had the Steelers plus 10, but I have the Rams straight up at on the money line plus 140. I'm going with that. But props, that one I'm not super confident about.
And real quick on one of the props I like this weekend is overall most passing yards over the weekend. The 2 guys I would bet on, Matthew Stafford against Detroit. The other one, and Jess mentioned it because I think he's going to throw a ton, Jordan Love. Jordan Love's plus 1,000 on my site. Matthew Stafford's plus 500. So, like, there's a huge variance there, but I think Love's going to have to throw the ball a ton, man. Like, a ton for them to have a chance. So, like, just small monies on those. But, yeah, but Stafford's, like, my actual pick, whereas Love would be a small one. I'm taking the over in that Rams-Lions game. I truly – I think my issue is I think I know the Rams are going to win, and I want the Lions to win, so I don't know how to bet.
The Eagles-Bucks game on Monday night. I want the Bucks to win, but
yeah, I'm kind of over the whole Eagles situation.
But I think the Eagles. I think this is where the Eagles figure it out. I do. I think the Eagles figure this out, and plus they are just vastly more talented than Tampa Bay. And so the struggles that they've been having defensively, I think, yeah, not that with a 3-point spread, you don't bet the spread on this one because it could very well be a 3-point game. I think the Eagles cover, but that's not a confident pick. But I do believe this will be a big game for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and I don't have any Hurts props right now. I don't know if you do, but I do not have any Hurts props.
Just
I don't know if that's with the AJ Brown situation, so they're not throwing in that stuff. But yeah, I'm taking the Eagles in this one. I'm going to take the over. I as Jess said, with it being as close as it is, -3 is too much. I just take the money line and the over on this one. I would take the other one. I would take Hurts first touchdown score at plus 425. I like that.
That's always not a bad bet, especially if they get down to the 1. And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise of Seaward podcast. Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. We will be back next week. Ideally, a couple of shows. We'll still be talking off-season stuff. We'll talk about the playoffs, things that happen. We'll talk about more about what's coming up for the Cardinals in the off-season. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening to this episode 506. We'll be back again next week.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Run!